So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining the webinar where I will discuss the 10 years of the PDSA animal wellbeing reports and the findings that are relevant to pet behaviour and mental wellbeing. So if you've not heard about the PDSA, I'll just give you a brief overview of who we are and what we do. The PDSA is the UK's largest veterinary charity. PDSA provides free and low-cost veterinary treatments to the sick and injured animals of people in need. The charity operates through a nationwide network of 48 pet hospitals with a 1,000-strong veterinary team, providing treatment to 470,000 pets each year and supporting 300,000 eligible pet owners in receipt of means-tested state benefits. So since 2011, PDSA have been conducting a large-scale research study into the welfare of the nation's pets. It's called the PDSA Animal Wellbeing Report, or PAW report for short. Today, I'll give you an introduction to the PAW report, what it is, how it came about, and the ways in which the findings from it are used. I'll take you through the methodology to explain how we work with YouGov and how the data is collected and analysed. I'll take you through the latest findings from the 2020 PAW report that are related to behaviour, including reflecting back on the past 10 years and also the impact of COVID-19. Whilst we were delivering advocacy, educational programmes and campaigns, it was at a time when there was no independent national surveillance of pet wellbeing in the UK. We felt it was vital to fill this surveillance gap because having a robust way of reporting on the state of pet wellbeing would enable us to identify welfare problems, to manage the scale of these problems, to track changes over time, to assist with prioritising actions, and to promote work to address priority problems. The sector also needed a way to measure the success of the Animal Welfare Act legislation and to ultimately show whether or not we were making a difference. With that in mind, the PAW report was developed and launched in 2011. The findings over the last 10 years have allowed us to build a really comprehensive picture of pet wellbeing in the UK and enables us to determine how well the nation of animal lovers are providing for their 5 welfare needs of their pets. Throughout, we've worked with one of the UK's leading research companies, YouGov, to ensure that the data we collect is nationally representative, so it can be a credible source of information and insight. So what do the findings from the PAW report help us to do? It allows us to explore whether the UK's pet dogs, cats and rabbits are having their welfare needs met. We can assess trends and welfare problems for these species, especially now that we've built up 10 years of data. We can explore pet owners' preparation for and experience of pet ownership. We provide annual estimates for the UK population of pet dogs, cats and rabbits. And we also survey veterinary professionals to gain essential insight from them on pet health and welfare. So let's move on to look at the PAW survey methodology in a bit more detail. The survey itself is conducted online, and the strength of working with YouGov is that they use their panel methodology to ensure that the data collected are representative of pet owners across the UK. To do this, each year they draw a representative sample of pet owners from their panel of over 1 million UK adults. YouGov ensure that the data collected are representative of the entire population of dog, cat, and rabbit owners in the UK. They do this by age, gender, and region. And they do this in 2 ways. First, they set demographic quotas during the fieldwork to ensure that they receive a representative spread of respondents. For example, they check that there aren't proportionally more respondents from one region than the other when compared to the breakdown of pet owners across the UK regions. And they will also boost certain regions as required to guarantee a representative sample. Secondly, weighting is applied to the data to correct for any small imbalances in the final sample. The demographic profiles of pet owners across the UK that this methodology is based on is derived from a separate nationally representative sample of 10,000 UK adults, and this is updated annually to ensure accuracy. So taking this methodology, which we have worked with YouGov to apply throughout the last 10 years of the PAW report, we conducted 2 pet owner surveys in 2020. One in February, which we'd always planned to do as part of our annual survey. And this was fortuitous as it gave us a data set from immediately prior to the first lockdown. At that time, we surveyed 4,767 pet owners to understand how the 5 welfare needs of the nation's pets were being met. Then, in response to the pandemic, we conducted a second survey in August 2020 with a focus on looking at what might have changed as a result of lockdown and the other changes that have affected people's lives. In the second survey, we surveyed 4,103 pet owners and predominantly focused on areas that were thought to be the most affected by restrictions. These included pet population, pet acquisition, diet, preventive healthcare, and pet behaviour. I'll now discuss some of the findings from the first 2020 report. We know that there are many physical and psychological benefits of dog ownership, and 88% of owners report that owning a dog makes them mentally healthier. Despite the association between dog walking and social and physical benefits, 13% of dogs are still not walked every day, and I'll discuss this further on the next slide. Dog training helps dogs learn appropriate skills and strengthens the human-animal bond. Yet 12% of owners haven't trained their dog in any way, and this can create problem behaviours later on in life. Regarding exercise, as previously mentioned, 13% of owners reported that their dog is not walked every day, and 42% of dogs are walked for less than 30 minutes at a time. And of those dogs, only 14% were due to medical reasons, which means a large proportion of dogs are potentially not getting adequate exercise. Walks are great to allow dogs to expend physical and mental energy. Walks enable them to have social interactions, to sniff and take in information about the world around them, and to bond with their owner, which is important for their well-being. We also asked owners if they had any concerns about walking their dog. 13% reported that they are scared of their dog being attacked by another dog, suggesting that owners may have had previous negative experiences with other dogs. 10% are concerned about their dog not coming back when called, and 9% are concerned about their dog's behaviour. So now I'd like to put a question to the audience. As we're talking about dog behaviour, I'd like to ask you a question on what do you think normal dog behaviours are? And please tick as many as you want. And your options are digging, tail chasing, barking, and chewing. So what do you think normal behaviours are? Digging, tail chasing, barking, or chewing? We'll give you 30 seconds or so just to complete those. Brilliant. So some answers here. So 100% of people think digging is a normal behaviour. 47% think tail chasing is a normal behaviour. 80% think barking is a normal behaviour. And 93% think chewing is a normal behaviour. Brilliant. So I'll just go through these. So barking, I've made a bit of a red herring here, so I'll discuss that when we come to it. But barking, absolutely a normal behaviour, form of communication. So well done, everybody. Digging as well. Dogs absolutely love it. It's a fun thing for dogs to do, and it's a form of exercise. So again, a lot of you said chewing was a normal behaviour. So chewing, yep, is a really fun thing for dogs to do. It also helps to reduce anxiety and to help them to self-soothe. Tail chasing was a bit of a red herring here, so absolutely it can be done as part of a normal behaviour, especially in puppies, if it's just for a short period of time and part of play. But if it is prolonged and excessive, it's likely something might be wrong mentally with the dog, or it usually happens in a poor state of behaviour, a poor state of welfare, sorry. So moving on, when asked what behaviours dog owners would like to change, the most common were pulling on the lead at 24%, being afraid of fireworks at 22%, barking at dogs at 21%, and jumping up at people at 19%. So besides being afraid of fireworks and potentially barking at dogs, these behaviours that owners would like to change are likely to be more problematic for owners rather than being a welfare problem for the dog. And these may also be linked to owners not training their dog in any way at all, as previously mentioned. So in Scotland, we found there was a bit of a difference. The most common behaviours owners would like to change are barking at dogs at 26%, pulling on the lead at 22%, and being afraid of fireworks at 20%. So again, I'm going to put a question out to you, audience. So I'd like you to answer, if you had a dog or any pet, where would you go to for behaviour advice? Would you look on the internet? Would you speak to your vet? Would you speak to a dog trainer? Would you speak to a clinical animal behaviourist or someone else? So that's where would you go to for behaviour advice? The internet? Would you speak to your vet? Would you ask a dog trainer or a clinical animal behaviourist or someone else? And that's other. We'll just give you another 10 seconds or so to complete those. Brilliant. So 53% of you would go to the internet for behaviour advice. Most popular, 82% would speak to their vet, 65% would speak to a dog trainer, 71% would go to a clinical animal behaviourist, and 18% would ask someone else. So that's quite a high percentage of you that would turn to the internet. So like anything, you get online and you Google, most people would turn to the internet for advice. However, there's a wealth of unscientific and dangerous information online about dog behaviour. So just make sure you're reading credible sources, and you could go to the PDSA website for some information. Dog trainers can also be a great source of advice, but make sure they're ABTC registered. But for more extensive problems, a behaviourist might be necessary for problems that aren't related to training. So make sure any behaviourist that you speak to is ABTC registered. At the moment, anyone can call themselves a behaviourist. It's not a protective title. So it's important that you are directed to a certified clinician. Certified clinicians and behaviourists only work via vet referral. So as many behaviour problems have an underlying medical component, you should always be speaking to your vet first. Our 2020 survey of the veterinary profession, sorry, that's barking, showed that 53% of vets and nurses say they've seen increased numbers of owners seeking behavioural advice over the past couple of years. And this is of concern given that behaviour problems severely affect welfare. Moreover, behaviour is a primary reason for euthanasia in dogs, so it's imperative that we prioritise the treatment of emotional and mental problems in dogs. 46% of vets and nurses reported that they have seen an increase in euthanasia due to behaviour problems in dogs. And 61% have seen an increase in phobic behaviour. Common phobias include sounds like fireworks and thunderstorms, but can include anything, and commonly fear of people and other animals. These phobias can have a number of causes and factors, such as genetic predispositions, previous bad experiences, and lack of socialisation as a puppy. So moving on to talk about cats. Our key findings from the 2020 report were that 26% of cats live indoors only. Indoor cats have increased welfare implications due to the difficulty in meeting their needs indoors. Cats have a natural tendency to explore, and the outdoor environment provides physical and mental stimulation and allows them to carry out normal behaviours. And this can be more difficult to facilitate in an indoor environment, and as a result of this, problem behaviours can occur. We also found that 42% of cats live in a multi-cat households, with 20% of these that don't get along with other cats. So it's likely that a large proportion of cats might be dealing with chronic stress. Access to resources can be a great source of conflict in multi-cat households. A general rule is to have one resource for each cat plus one. For example, if you had 2 cats, you would have 3 litter trays, all in different locations. We find that 64% of multi-cat households may have just 1 litter tray, and this suggests there's a major problem regarding resource provision in the UK's cat population. We also found that in multi-cat households, 56% have 1 or no scratching posts, 50% have 1 or no water bowl, and 44% and 36% are having to share beds in high places or have none at all. This is likely to be compromising welfare in cats and may be causing inter-cat conflict, especially in those cats that don't get along. So another question in the audience, similar to the dog one, in cats, what do you think normal behaviours are? So if you can select from scratching, hunting, grooming, and hiding. So out of these, what do you think all the normal behaviours in cats are? Scratching, hunting, grooming, and hiding. So we'll just give you another few more seconds just to complete that. Brilliant. So quite a few big high ones there. So 94% of you think scratching is a normal behaviour. Hunting and grooming, both at 100%, brilliant. And 56% of you think hiding is a normal behaviour. So great answers there, everyone. So scratching is an important behaviour in cats. They scratch to maintain their claws and also to communicate. Pheromones are released from the glands between their toes in order to communicate with other cats. So some cats more than others are highly motivated to hunt. And again, as you said, it's a normal behaviour. And this isn't usually hunger driven. Now they can exhibit this hunting behaviour through play and with toys. Like you said, grooming is a normal behaviour and allows cats to maintain their coats. But over-grooming might be a sign of stress or pain. And if 2 cats groom one another, that's an indication that they like each other. So again, I put a bit of a red herring in here. So again, hiding is a normal behaviour in cats. It allows them to feel safe and avoid things that they don't like. But again, if they're doing this excessively, if they're hiding frequently, it may indicate that they're unhappy or are in pain. So if you notice that your cat is hiding quite a bit, it's important to speak to your vet about this. So when we asked owners what behaviours they would like to change in their cats, the most common were scratching furniture at 26%, scratching carpets at 20%, waking them up at 17%, and begging for food at 16%. Again, these behaviours are those that owners may find problematic, but these are unlikely to impact a cat's well-being negatively. And furthermore, as I said before, scratching is a natural and important behaviour to facilitate in cats. We also find that 14% of owners would like to change their cat being timid, scared, or nervous, and 6% wanting to change hiding behaviours, and 6% wanting to change inappropriate toileting. Chronic stress is a known welfare problem in cats and can cause a number of medical problems, such as urinary tract disease and skin disease. The veterinary profession also view emotional health as a cause for concern. We asked veterinary professionals what they feel are the most important welfare issues in cats, and they ranked multi-cat households to be a top welfare issue for cats at 51%. Obesity and not seeking veterinary care when required are at 44%, chronic stress at 43%, and having inadequate resources at 39%. In rabbits, we find that 26% are kept in inadequate housing conditions. Rabbits need to be able to stand up on their hind legs in their accommodation and stretch out fully. They also need space to hop and run and need to have the ability to hide and dig. And if this is not facilitated, their welfare will be negatively impacted and it can manifest as behaviour problems. Rabbits are a highly social species, but despite this, 42% of rabbits live alone, which demonstrates that many rabbits may also not be having their social needs met alongside their environmental needs. Physical health may also be greatly affected in rabbits, as 14% receive no preventive care at all. And if these rabbits are having no preventive care, they may not be seeing a vet until they are very sick and suffering. Regarding a rabbit's environment, we find that they spend the majority of time in their hutch, on average a total of 11 hours. Given that over a quarter of rabbits are kept in inadequate housing and 42% live alone, this raises some serious welfare concerns, as a huge proportion of rabbits are not having their welfare needs met, and behaviour problems may result as a consequence of this. Regarding behaviours owners want to change in their rabbits, digging up the ground and/or carpets was the most common at 16%, followed by thumping back feet at 15% and chewing furniture at 14%. And these numbers were similar when looking at the data for Scotland only. Like cats, these are all normal behaviours in rabbits, and if the environment was correct, this would prevent or at least mitigate some of these behaviours. Thumping back feet can indicate a worried rabbit, so it's important to try and establish what is causing this behaviour. So in our post-lockdown survey, we not only wanted to find out the impact that lockdown had had on pets, but also the effect on the human-animal relationship. We asked owners questions surrounding how they feel about their pet during lockdown. Overall, 49% said that owning a pet has been a lifeline during the pandemic. 54% of those were dog owners, 45% were cat owners, and 44% were rabbit owners. This demonstrates the vital therapeutic role that pets play in human lives, and that they have likely helped with stress reduction and improved quality of life in owners due to the large proportion of people saying that their pet makes them mentally healthier. Lockdown has also had an impact on pet behaviour, and 20% of dog owners reported that they have seen new behaviours since lockdown. Out of these 20%, 24% have seen new signs of distress when left alone, and 27% said their dog is spending more time in quiet areas of the home. 16% have seen barking or vocalising for more than 5 minutes at a time, and 14% have reported their dog barking at other dogs. Out of all these new behaviours seen, it's unknown if these are genuinely new or owners are just noticing these due to being home more. However, it does make sense that separation distress has increased due to dogs having limited independent time and that their routine and predictability has been disrupted. Also, as more people may be around at times when dogs might be relaxing, dogs are probably spending more time in quiet areas of the house to avoid people and have some time alone. As a result of lockdown, dogs have had less contact with other people and other dogs, therefore may not know how to interact when they do see them and might be more reactive when they encounter them. 23% of cat owners report that they've seen new behaviours since the start of the pandemic. Of these 23%, the most common new behaviours seen are vocalising at 25%, begging for food at 19%, and waking them up at 15%. And this is unsurprising, given that a change in routine would, and more owners being home would elicit attention-seeking behaviour. And it's important to monitor these behaviours as the world becomes more normal again, so we can assess any long-term impact on pet welfare. I'll now discuss some of the findings from our paw data collected over the 10 years in relation to behaviour. From 2016 to 2019, there was a significant increase in people that used aversive training aids, and this increased from 22% to 25%. These training aids include citronella collars, electric shock collars, vibrating collars, prong collars, choke chains, pet corrector spray, water pistol sprays, or homemade rattle or noise devices. So some people view these tools as a quick fix to stop behaviours they don't like, such as a dog not coming back to them. So dogs learn by association. If something good happens when they do something, they're more likely to do it again. If something they don't like happens, they're less likely to perform that behaviour again. Using aversive training aids might involve hurting the dog when they get further from the owner, or hurting the dog until they start coming back to you. Now, this may work in some cases, but largely the dog will have no idea what to do. This type of training is based on making the dog scared, and it doesn't address the underlying motivation for the behaviour occurring, and ultimately using these tools is unethical. There's now a large body of evidence to show that using positive behaviour modification therapy is effective, and it promotes positive well-being in dogs. Moreover, the evidence shows that using aversive training equipment decreases the probability of successful treatment. So it's extremely worrying that a quarter of owners are using these tools, given their many harms and their association with increased fear and aggression. The impact on dog well-being and also the bite risk to people is of great concern with the use of these tools. We also asked owners questions about where they would acquire a new pet from. 24% they would get a puppy from a puppy farm in 2012, but thankfully that has decreased over time and was at 18% in 2020. Conversely, more owners would consider getting a pet from outside of the UK. This was 28% in 2016, but went up to 36% in 2020. But despite the number of people saying they would get a puppy from a puppy farm has decreased, 18% is still quite concerning. Research from the SSPCA provided preliminary evidence that puppy farming had negative impacts on behavioural and physical health. Regarding imported dogs, there's also growing concern about the associated disease risk and also the trauma of the importing process. So I've only discussed a small amount of data that we collect in the PAW report. If you would like to read further, please download it from our site at pdsa.org.uk. That'll be /PAW 2020. So I'll now pass you over to Kirsty, who will be discussing behaviour and mental health in companion animals.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachel, for all of that information. And it was actually the PAW report that kind of gave me the inspiration for the topic of this talk originally. I was struck by the fact that so many people say that having companion animals benefits their mental health, but that some of the other statistics suggest that the mental health needs of the animals themselves are possibly not always being met. I think we definitely love our animals, but we possibly don't understand them well enough always. And recently there has been a growing recognition of the importance of human mental health, and acknowledgement of that and discussion around that. And I would like to see the same shift for our animals. So what I'd like to do is just pull out some of the threads of the information that Rachel presented there, especially around the unwanted behaviours, and see if we can reframe them in a way that sort of can help us benefit our animals more. So You can see the title here, Behaviour Problems. That is another phrase that's commonly used for these unwanted behaviours. We call them that because the behaviour is what we see and what we recognise rather than the mental or emotional state behind them. And because they're problems for us, they may or may not also be problems for the animals involved. And when I was looking at all the statistics and the unwanted behaviour cited in the PAW report, to me it seems like they could all fit into one or more of these three categories on the screen just now. So what I'd like to do is just look at these each briefly. So on the next slide, we've got a cat scratching. And as Rachel's already discussed, that's normal behaviour. So a lot of people said that one of the unwanted behaviours was scratching in cats. And I think in the report it was separated into furniture and carpets, but when you put them together, it was quite a lot of people said that their cat scratched and they didn't like that. As Rachel already said, that's not only normal behaviour, but it's kind of a fundamental need. And similarly with rabbits, two of the most common unwanted behaviours were digging and chewing. Again, completely normal behaviours for that species. So I think if we're going to bring animals into our homes, we need to look at the species and learn about their needs and understand, what is normal for them and to provide for those needs. I would say also we should remember that just like people, animals are individuals. They all have different personalities and preferences, and that's part of the joy of owning them, is getting to know them. So we should also get to know them as individuals and learn to try and learn their body language, and they'll tell us to some extent when they need a change. So we can try and provide that for them. So for each species, I'm just going to very briefly touch on one or two things that are normal behaviour. Obviously, that's a huge topic. Rachel's already talked about some things. I'm not going to be able to cover everything, but just one or two points that are relevant to the other things we're discussing today. So here we have a cat with gorgeous eyes. Aren't they lovely? Have a nice look. In real life, direct eye contact is one of the things we do that cats don't like. So enjoy this photo instead. I think the key point to think about here is that unlike rabbits and dogs and humans, cats are not inherently social animals. What they really need to feel secure is control over their territory and resources, and especially so when there are more than one cat in the house, as Rachel already mentioned. The next slide has a lovely rabbit. And unlike the other species, rabbits are prey animals. So one of the things this means is that they're not going to complain vocally. If you're in the wild and you're a prey animal, making a lot of noise is not a very wise decision. So what rabbits quite often do when they're scared is they just freeze, hence the term rabbit in the headlights. But I think that unfortunately that can too easily be misconstrued as a kind of neutral state, that they're just fine because they're sitting there, right? And it's possibly also given them the reputation of being an easy pet or good for children. But actually, rabbits have complex needs like all the other species, and children's movements and sounds can actually be quite scary for them, and they don't like being picked up. So the other thing about rabbits is that they are very social animals, and they really need the company of other animals to feel secure. And they also need space and opportunities to play and dig and explore. So the next slide is the final species we're talking about today. And I should mention that, of course, there are many other different species that are companion animals, and we just don't have time to talk about them all. So we're looking at the sort of three most commonly kept companion animals. And I think dogs, possibly more than any other domestic species, we have shaped by our selective breeding over the generations. And in the past, that was maybe more so that they could work for us, they could perform certain jobs. I think recently a lot of it's about appearance. But throughout the common thread, what really stands out is that we've sort of created this animal that really craves our company and attention and approval in a way that's one of the reasons we love them, right? That unwavering joy at your arrival, and they're so trainable and loyal. They've got that reputation, don't they? So we love them for all those reasons, but that also comes with a responsibility to provide for their needs. So they look to us for guidance, and we need to give that to them. And they really do desire our company. So again, we need to provide that. So that brings me on to the next of my categories that I had sort of divided these behaviours into. And I just wanted to look at this headline as a sort of case study example. This is quite a recent headline. And as you can see, it's looking at the fact that dog bites have increased during lockdown. And I wanted to use it as an example of how humans' environments and the way we behave can actually shape our dog or our animals' behaviours and affect their mental health. So this is not a terrible article at all. It's fine. It has some good behaviour experts who give good quotes and good advice. At the same time, there were some aspects of it that I found a bit problematic, so I just thought we could look at them. The first being that it's a bit human-centred, right? You know, like, without taking away from the severity of dog bites, they're not the biggest problematic outcome of the pandemic puppy explosion. I think we need to acknowledge that the animals themselves are quite often suffering, especially those that originated at puppy farms. Another thing about this article is that throughout, dogs are referred to as it. And that's not uncommon. It's actually the norm in journalism, writing in general. But a dog's not an it. A dog is a he or a she, or a Fred or a puppy, or, you know. I think we don't do it with our own animals. You know, you wouldn't really refer to your own dog as it. But when we talk more widely about animals, it is quite common to refer to them as it. And it's one of the things I would quite like to see changed. I think if we change the way we speak about animals, that might help us change the way we think about them sometimes. So I also just wanted to pick out two quotes from this article, one of which is in the narrative of the text itself. And the writer says, "But dogs, more than ever, are also now treated as family members. Boundaries have become blurred, guards have dropped." I just wanted to question that. I mean, in a lot of ways, dogs are family members and are treated as such. However, especially the dogs being mentioned in this article, I would say that's not entirely accurate. I mean, would we expect our human family members to grow up as healthy, balanced individuals with little or no education, chances to develop social skills, or emotional support? Hopefully we would never expect that of a human, and yet for a lot of the dogs in this article, they didn't receive any of those things. And the second quote I wanted to look at was from one of the people who was bitten. And she said, "Dogs are just cute, cuddly things on Instagram for some people who maybe haven't grown up with them, but people forget that they are animals." I struggle with that. For one thing, we're animals too. But the way she says it there, it's quite disparaging, like people forget they're animals, that's why they bite, you know. Actually, no, that's not fair to the dogs. These dogs in this article were biting, probably in a lot of cases because they're scared. I mean, biting is quite often defensive, but regardless, they were biting because they had not been given the tools they needed to navigate our world. They weren't sort of well balanced mentally, perhaps. And that leads us on nicely to the next slide, which sort of looks at the final thing and really the core of what I wanted to talk about today, which is mental health for our animals. So for each of these three species, let's maybe just look at one potential mental health concern. Rabbits, as Rachel already mentioned, one of the most common unwanted behaviour was thumping. And rabbits do that when they're scared or anxious. So if it's happening a lot, it could show that they're not comfortable in their environment, or that they're frequently being exposed to things that they find threatening. In a somewhat similar vein, quite a lot of people said that they didn't like that their cats were hiding a lot, and or were just nervous in general. And the other thing that Rachel mentioned was that there's quite a lot of chronic stress in cats. And I think we know how debilitating chronic stress can be in humans, and I'm sure we don't want that for animals either. And looking at dogs, separation anxiety can be a huge source of distress. And it seems that there are signs that it might have become more of a problem during lockdown for some dogs. And there is also the potential concern that it will become more of a problem for some as we come out of lockdown. So for all of these things, I would like to try and consider them more as the mental health concerns that they are, rather than behaviour problems that need to be fixed. And I think more and more people are doing that, which is great. And there are behavioural experts who can help, and Rachel's already sort of discussed how to find good expert help. So moving on to the next slide, just to look at some other possibilities of more generally how we can support our animals' mental health, either as individuals with our own animals, or just sort of as a part of a wider movement who wants to make life fulfilling for animals. And there are lots and lots of things we could do. These are just a few possibilities, but I'll go through them each briefly. So the next slide is returning to our normal behaviours, and the fact that we need to just understand and provide for the needs of our animals. And Rachel's already discussed some of those needs. And as she said, the PDSA website has some good suggestions for ways we can provide for animals. I think one of the things she mentioned with cats was that more cats are being kept inside, entirely inside. And there are good reasons for that, including protecting wild animals and birds. But it can mean that we need to work harder to provide a complex environment that gives them the physical and mental stimulation that they would otherwise get hunting and exploring, for example. And there are a variety of toys. There are things like puzzle feeders. And similarly with rabbits, there are all sorts of things we can do to provide for rabbits' needs. We can give them a box of earth to dig in, we can give them branches to chew, foraging trays, tunnels, cardboard boxes, and as we already said, they just need space as well, and company. So on the next slide, we're looking at education, and it's really important, especially early in life. I think it was 12% of dogs receive no training at all. And with dogs, as I said, because we take them out into the world, they possibly need more training than other animals. And some of the unwanted behaviours, like jumping up or pulling on the lead, can be prevented or altered with appropriate training. And again, Rachel talked a little bit about what is good training. But I think we can and should train our other animals as well. So for example, with cats, part of providing scratching posts initially is teaching them how to use those scratching posts, and that's what we want them to do rather than scratch something else. We need, for all of our animals, we need to provide them early education that lets them navigate our world. So we need to give them lots of positive experiences that are relevant to their lives and their worlds, and sort of teach them how we want them to react to that. So that's what we call socialization. It's really vitally important to allowing them to become mentally and emotionally healthy. And I think one of the things that was mentioned in all of these species actually was that there were quite a lot of phobias. And that's not always, but can be just due to a lack of good socialization early on and being exposed to those things in a positive way. If the phobias have already developed, we can help the animals overcome them, at least to some extent. And again, that's something that you would probably want professional help for, and Rachel's already discussed who those professionals are. So finally, on the next slide, I just wanted to talk a little bit about choice and control. And I think one of the ways we can really bring some positive mental health benefits to our animals is if you just pause for a second there, Kirsty. Sorry, I'm not ready. Thanks, thank you. Yeah, so for our animals, I think giving them a little bit of agency over their life can make a huge difference to them. So, you know, giving them a little bit of control and some choices, and that can be things that seem quite small, like for example with cats and rabbits, not just suddenly picking them up with no warning, but instead giving them the choice of how and when they want to interact with us. And that may occasionally mean their choice is no, I don't want to. I think for rabbits especially, like if you get down on their level on the ground, that can be a less threatening way for them to begin an interaction with you. For dogs, perhaps when you're out on a walk, occasionally allowing them to dictate the pace and direction to some extent, and also to sniff. So there's a writer and researcher who writes about dogs, Alexandra Horowitz, and she says that we, due to our very poorly developed sense of smell, we're missing out on all sorts of information that dogs get regularly. And so she talks about sniff walks and just allowing your dog to sniff for as long as he or she wants. I think it's maybe a bit like social media for them or something, you know, they're getting all this information about who was here and what were they doing. And so that can be quite enriching and something that we can do for them. And the final thing for all of our animals is something that's known as cooperative care. And that's what we're going to show in this video in a minute. But what it is taking procedures that are necessary for physical health, but perhaps a little bit uncomfortable, maybe even painful for the animal, and so can therefore become a source of stress. So things like veterinary procedures, grooming, and sometimes that ends up being a situation where the dog has to be restrained or the animal has to be restrained, and then there's a sort of anticipation and anxiety around it, and it can become quite difficult. And so this is offering a different way to approach these situations. And I should say that this is the result of quite extensive training. So what we're seeing is the end result. But I think even that training, that experience itself can help really develop a very strong sort of trust-based relationship. So anyway, we'll play this video now. We're going to keep the sound off so we can kind of talk through it. So this dog is having her nails trimmed. So the consent behavior is when she puts her head on the floor. So that's her way of saying, yes, I'm ready for you to trim my nails. So the human waits. The dog puts her head down. That's her saying, yes, I'm ready. The human trims, head up, reward me, please. And you can see that she's been quite generous with the rewards. Like she's really giving the dog a reason to want to be involved in this. There's no stress, there's no restraint. Now she's just going to wait again. So, a little second thought there. So the human's not going to do anything until the head is down. Head down means, yes, I'm ready. I'm going to trim another nail. Oh, head up, more rewards, please. Plenty of rewards. Now it says if there's hesitation offering consent behavior. So the dog's not putting her head back down, which means she's not ready to continue. So they just have a break. So I think that's really important as well, is the dog decided to finish that session. And you know, the procedure wasn't finished. They hadn't trimmed all of her nails, and presumably they'll come back at some point and do the rest. But by giving the animal control over that situation and a lack of stress, a lack of restraint, and letting them choose when to start and stop, I think you can really remove that sort of anxiety around these potentially difficult situations. So to go to our final slide, I am more or less finished with my talk, and I thank you for listening. Before we end, I would actually like to get you to watch a wee tiny bit more video and then ask you a question. So let's go ahead and play the clip, and then we'll talk a little bit about it afterwards. Perfect. Thank you.
So in our last session, Cheryl was like asking me questions, and then she was just like, how do you deal with your loneliness? Like, it was this thing that was out there that like everybody knew. And I was like, of course, like, what are you talking about? I'm totally fine. But now I'm realizing, you know, she's right. Like, and then I'm wondering, when did I get so lonely? And like, how does everybody else but me know about this? And I think it must have started when Nan took time off last year and I wanted to really focus on bonding and kind of let everything else fall by the wayside. And then now that she's going back to school, and of course I'm like super happy for her and that's fantastic and all, but now I don't really have anybody. I'm just kind of by myself a lot. And I mean, I have a ton of friends, like a ton of really, really great friends, but I want something deeper.
Video there, yeah. So I am interested in how we can sort of change our perspective to reframe how we think about animal mental health and take it as seriously as we do our human mental health. And I have mixed feelings about this video. I generally don't like giving animals human voices like this. I think it has the potential to be a bit demeaning, and it's not helping us look at things from their perspective. At the same time, in this case, I think it maybe does what I'm trying to do, which is get us to take animals' mental health seriously. So I'm actually quite curious, and I would like to know what you think. So I have mixed feelings. How do you feel about this video? Do you think that it's a helpful way to highlight animal mental health? Or do you think it's not helpful, or you don't like it for some other reason? Or are you a bit like me with mixed feelings, or you're not sure how you feel about it? So anyway, the poll's up there. I'll give you a little bit longer to say what you think. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, so 61% said that it's a helpful way to highlight animal mental health. 39% have mixed feelings, and nobody thought it wasn't helpful. So that's actually really good for me to know, because, you know, as people who are trying to enhance animals' lives, things like messaging are important. So thank you for your assistance there, and thank you for listening.